ordinary man, don't you know? Your life is worth more than this. Catch me if you fall, catch me if you're low. The loot goes high and up, as fast as you can go. Oh, catch me if you fall, catch me when you're low. All right. Just hopping in to say what's up to everyone. Thank you for coming back. I know that was pretty annoying, but we are green. Switched over because Saturn and Jupiter are just racing to set at 6:44 p.m. Eastern, East Coast, Central Florida, chilly night, amazing conjunction happening. Hopping on up to the top, hopping in up. Debbie Carson, great to see you. Douglas Perry and Rainbows and Butterflies. Dr. Ayad, NGC, Rastaman Lives, Rastaman. Rainbows and Butterflies. I see you. Mary Quite, Sigh. Cat, what's happening? Nericor, Patrick, and Ellie Wynn, you're back. Hans is back, and all right. So, Jedi Princess, what's going on? So let me know if how bad it was on the last stream, if I didn't answer any questions, or if the songs were really chopped up and really terrible. I'll play them again. But that was a little catch to get us started. I'm going to stay here with Jupiter and Saturn because honestly they're going to set so soon against the tree line, and then we'll have a little bit of time with the moon. Even though it's looking amazing tonight. Let's play a song here. I'll let Golden play, actually, and I'll put up some labels so I can... Let me know if you can see the little moon right next to Saturn up at the top. Not the bright one, that's Titan, but the one to the right of that. Let me just double check and see. Is that Dione? No, that's Rhea. That's pretty incredible. I gotta say, like, I don't think I've ever seen... well, that's not true. I've seen Rhea, like, so Rhea's there, then right after is Dione, which is closer to Saturn, then at the left of Saturn is Tethys. You have Mimas, Enceladus, Hyperion. You have a whole bunch of Saturnian moons, but I gotta say, in a shot like this, to see 2 moons of Saturn is pretty great. Because I feel like, I stopped myself because I feel like tomorrow and the day after we're going to see a bunch more. I feel like like Tethys will probably be visible as well as Rhea and Titan. So we'll see. Back to the start of Golden and some labels. Alright, what's up everybody? Before the next tune, just chat with y'all for a moment. You see, we're already getting smearing because Jupiter and Saturn are both like so close and they're both hitting the treetops at the same time. So less detail as the seconds tick by and ultimately they'll vanish. But man, it was a crazy sight looking outside right now because they're like stacked. It's a beautiful sight to see. That was a song called Golden, and dropped the labels in for you that we could see. You know, if it were a little bit clearer and a little higher up, we would see the like 4 more Saturnian moons, maybe 5. But still, can't complain. Want to hop to the top and say what's up to everybody I missed. See, Hans is back, and Patrick is back, and Michael Smith Jr., hello, what's going on? Who else? Did I miss anyone? Dennis, and yeah, alright, give me a shout if I missed you, or let me know also if you have any requests or any questions about Electric Universe stuff. Missed a little, wasted a bit of time on that whole buffering issue, so didn't get to do more zooms on Jupiter and Saturn, sadly, tonight. But either way, captured a sharp shot. It got a little chilly all of a sudden, so when this shot disappears, I'm going to head over to the moon, and actually we'll do some zoomed-in moon shots tonight, because we have a little bit more time with it. Stream looks like it's green. Let's keep going with the tunes here. Play something maybe y'all haven't heard. let's relax here on the moon for a little bit. I know it's very bright, so I had the shutter open so we could see the Earth shine, or the dark side, more clearly. Now I've reduced it a bit more, so this is the second type of shot where you can very faintly see the occulted or the in-shadow portion. And you can see the Terminator line cutting right through some really prominent features. And that crater at the bottom you see with the little dot in the center, I'm trying to find the exact correct name for that. I feel like it's near Mare Nectaris. And it is. But what is it called? Is it Fracastorius? It could be this crater Fracastorius. It's not Petavius. It's not Langrenus. But you can see it very clearly at the bottom middle position. And then there are a couple little blobbies. Those are also creeping in around Palus Somni and right near Mare Crisium. So we'll be able to see all of those when I flip the shot. But I just wanted to make sure we could see some of that nice part up top. You see Aristarchus glowing brightly even through that. And then you have Mare Imbrium, Sea of Serenity, Sea of Tranquility, going to be illuminated tomorrow night. Aristarchus, though, right? You can see it even through that. What's crazy is I could probably turn up... I could show you something really interesting, actually. So I'll open the shutter so we can see Earthshine portion much more clearly, and then let's zoom in there. It's going to be very grainy and noisy, but we'll see Aristarchus basically when we shouldn't be. Although, that's not true. Like, there's nothing in the way, right? We should be able to see this Earthshine portion. As I was explaining it yesterday, it made a lot more sense to me that yes, it's so sharply defined because the Earth gives off so much less energy than the Sun. And so it's really defined sharply, but it makes perfect sense as to why we can see all the rest of the features like a full moon right here. Pretty logical, if you ask me. So anyway, I do have my atlas up, so once we zoom in, I can tell you all the different names. Most prominent tonight is Mare Crisium. So, let me see if I missed anybody in the chat. What's happening? Jesslyn, you're back. What's going on? And Kat is asking, will the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction be seen on the west coast? Yeah, for sure. Pretty much everybody will see this. It's just depending on how long you have between pre-sunset and really sunset, which is about like 5:45 p.m. Eastern to about 6 p.m. is when you can just see the light of Jupiter, and Saturn is still too dim. So around 6 p.m., that's what I've been trying to get to. And then by, 7 o'clock right now, they're basically gone behind my tree line. And I have visibility up to about 12 degrees altitude, which is, not great, but like not bad. Hans is asking, is the reflection of the light giving off this green aura? So I think the green aura, if I'm not mistaken, is green is due to oxygen, is the oxygen band. So use a green filter to isolate the oxygen band, O3. So I feel like green is due to either noble gases on the surface of the moon, giving it like an overall thin layer of gases like xenon, argon, krypton. Like when I was researching gases on the surface of the moon, like does the moon have an atmosphere? You run into krypton and you're like, wait, this is that whole Superman thing, right? But kryptonite is green, and krypton, if I'm not mistaken, is a gas. And I'm going to double check because maybe I'm talking out of my ass. Kryptonite, I know. No. Krypton is an isotope, right? Let's see. Krypton, from ancient Greek kryptos, the hidden one, is a chemical element with the symbol Kr and atomic number 36. It is colorless, odorless, tasteless noble gas that occurs in trace amounts in the atmosphere and is often used with other rare gases in fluorescent lamps. I don't think it says anything about green. However, that's kind of the tie-in. I'm not trying to create any new sciences, but like cultural references are not devoid of their merit when it comes to figuring out stories about the world, right? So, like, why was kryptonite picked, and why was it depicted as green in the Saturn, in the Superman comics and then movies, and then what is Superman? You know, and then what is just all the myth around all the superheroes, so to speak, is ultimately the myth of the electric universe, right? Or I'm asking myself rhetorically, but I think it's akin to that. Whether or not it's intentional, you know, I'm not sure, but I feel like the myths get rewritten over and over again. So anyway, the green glow of the moon could be due to that, even though it did say it was colorless and odorless. What we do pick up in terms of vibrational frequencies and colors from space resonate with the Bayer matrix on our cameras, for example, the RGB, and they stimulate these photosensitive electric plates, and those determine what's green or red or blue. So potentially a certain type of gas or a certain type of electrical frequency is triggering the surface of the sensor to show the green color. Could also be due to glass. Could also be due to the glass on the front of the scope. And yeah, there are a lot of reasons it could be that. Just thinking. Yeah, so tomorrow, I feel like the weather is not going to be great tomorrow, but tomorrow, the day after, we'll zoom in on Jupiter and Saturn. I'll kind of start off zoomed in. Kal-El, right? Yeah, the whole Superman mythos is deep. Deep. All right, let's play some tunes here. Dang, that was quite a thing. So I got a crick in the neck from doing that. But I tried to scope it so quickly. So as I was changing the lens, I saw a satellite, a very slow-moving one, probably one of those GPS sats, or Starlink maybe. And it was moving right across the sky for me, and I was like, oh my god, change the lens, quickly change the lens. And then focus it on the moon quickly. And then as I was trying to do that, I was also keeping an eye on where the satellite was. Thankfully it was slow enough. And then I quickly moved the scope around. You can see that kind of streaky light for 1 second. At least I'm not crazy. But yeah, it was way too far out of sight for me and too hard to scope it. But I tried. Anyway, back here at the moon. So right now it's a Sony a6 right to the 8-inch, no glass between them, and you can see up top Aristarchus looking very clear, underneath it Copernicus and Kepler, and Mare Frigoris in general, Mare Imbrium to the right. You can see Plato crater easily, Sinus Iridum, and yeah, right now I'm recording some footage. And then let's move down to see the properly illuminated portion. I guess buffering is happening again. Yeah, it's just a series of things. Oh yeah, how about uploading no data? What's happening, Justice Alexander Bideau? Good to see you. And Bambaklat, what's happening? Oh, I see. Oh, Justice, you've been here for a bit. All right. Okie doke. So let's get back to this. Some more tunes here from the Midnight Moon album, which is not out yet. All these are not out yet, but I'm playing them for you anyway. This is called Buzzard. There's a little bit of noise rock called Buzzard. Still working on that one, but I know the mix is blown out like crazy. But yeah, that's all demos. Look at Mare Crisium tonight. Such a hexagon. Chef's kiss. Look how beautiful it is. And Proclus peeking out over the Terminator. And then you got Mare Fecunditatis underneath with the prominent crater being Langrenus. And then you see some of the beautiful Lichtenberg patterns and the shapes, the very structural square diamonds, hexagons, elongated hexagons, pentagons, and our recursive fractal conjugate geometry of nature back in it. I know that the buffering is just hell tonight, and I'm getting the same sort of errors, but thanks for bearing with me on this. Let's see, Justice Alexander Bidot had a question. Says, what's the azimuth of Jupiter and Saturn going to be on the 21st? So it's very close to what it is right now, which is 22-ish degrees. They're both, we kind of start seeing them at 25, and then by 10 or 12 degrees, that's my tree line. So very similar to today. I mean, what's going to happen is Saturn will overtake Jupiter, and then we'll see the same shot, but Saturn on the bottom and Jupiter on the top, and then they'll start drifting apart again. So it's not just the 21st, but like 22nd all the way probably through to the 28th will still be amazing views, as well as the full moon. I assume by azimuth you mean altitude, but correct me if I'm wrong. Go grab your guitars. Yeah, let's play some more guitar tunes here. Yeah, and the full moon I'll be playing some live music. I just dropped the TakeBackSpace Bandcamp link if you want to hear some of my stuff. It really doesn't, I don't have everything on Bandcamp at all. It's like about 100 of the tracks, but or less, 80 releases. But yeah, there are about 500 TakeBackSpace tracks that I will ultimately put out. Those who have been with me through the years know that there's just like countless moon tunes. I don't even know what to play sometimes, but I'm trying to do some weird ones tonight, stuff that I know y'all haven't really heard too much of. Let's do... yeah, let's do Rebel. But let me just make sure there are no other comments. So will Jupiter obscure Saturn? No, Mary, they'll be really, really close, though. Like right now, they're about half a degree apart. They'll be about 1 to 2 degrees apart. But I don't think they'll overlap. Well, I'm pretty sure they won't overlap. Although maybe they do overlap at a point in the sky that we can't see them at. So I didn't double check that, but I'd have to... let me just see that actually. There's probably a way to see that. So if I put this in ocular view in Stellarium and zoom in, pretty sure they won't occult. I mean, that would be incredible, right? You'd see Jupiter behind behind Saturn, right? That would be unbelievable. I doubt that would happen. Really, it would just be amazing though. No, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. I'm just scrubbing through Stellarium, but don't think it's going to happen. Yeah. Yeah, Saturn would be closer to us. So we'd see Saturn on top of Jupiter. If that were really the case, I feel like everybody in the world would be like talking about this, but most people just don't even know that this is occurring. All right, let's jump into some more tunes. This is Don't Trust the Rebel. And let's zoom in on Crisium. What is left to say on the edge of the shores of say yes to the night, blur like the city. Here, your love was the only simple way. Oh, deep down. Deep down, sleep down this jungle. Dream down this summer. And we feel Alright, zoomed in here to Mare Crisium. That was Rebel. So let's see, I had a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to talk about it. Patrick McNellis says, what's up with the short tremors I'm seeing? Not the focusing movement. That's just because the way I have it set up, I've talked about it in the past, but I set up in two different places on at my house. I put this 8-inch on the back steps, so I have the scope leaning basically on one step and two of the legs of the tripod in my porch doorway, which is just really dangerous, but like I secure it with a bunch of things. And then, yeah, so the scope is basically on a staircase. And then every time I step over there, because it's so wobbly, the whole scope shakes. And then when I move the camera even ever so slightly, because the whole thing is kind of like, the camera's heavy with the lens and the tube, and it's really wobbly. So, yeah, that's what those tremors are. G-Wagon says, where are the little green men? They've all vanished. They're all on MSNBC. Let's see. I'll have the somersault. Let's see. Charlie Silverman, right, says, I found a channel on the YouTubes that was trying to debunk the electric universe. They compared it to this other concept. I've talked about all that in the past, and I feel like my take on it is, I could easily be a little like, that's so stupid, he's so stupid, which is for sure true. But I think it's really more so that people spend time debunking things than discovering new things is really the bottom line, and how ridiculous that really is. Like, all channels, absolutely everyone from like Mythbusters to this guy, and even my favorite, Dr. Marie Robitaille, debunking the debunker. And I'm like, bro, honestly, what a waste of time instead of studying new shit. Using the balance. Exactly. They all went home. Stober, Pinellas County, what's happening? Welcome. And Mary, you said Jupiter will obscure Saturn. Yeah, so when that song was playing, I double-checked with Stellarium. They won't ever overlap, but they will come side by side, so it'll be a really cool shot. Stober says, just under the arrow at the top center, there's a quarter of a crater rim. What is that? Well, let's zoom in. So this large mare is Mare Crisium. The two little kind of eyelets of the crab are Pierce and Picard. All right, so those are a couple. And then above Mare Crisium, or rather to the top right of your screen, it's Cleomedes. And that's a very interesting shape. You can see it's kind of an elongated diamond-shaped hexagon. Then to the left of that, to the left of Cleomedes, the one that's kind of very dark and has its own little crescent, that's Macrobius crater. And to the right of it, the smaller version of it is Tisserand. So Tisserand and Microbia. If you follow that down a little bit more, you'll see the little snake to the mouth of Mare Crisium and kind of gateway. To the north of that, you'll see a tiny darkened crater that's very bright at its edge. That's Proclus, Proclus. It's one of my favorites, and I point it out all the time. And you can very clearly see the rim of Mare Crisium looking like an angular hexagon here. I don't even have to draw it, you can just see it. Definitely not circular. Time is precious, use it wisely. I assume in regards to what I said about debunking. I mean, look, sometimes it's important if somebody says, hey, like, I have this theory and I want to test this theory with somebody. And you tell somebody that theory and they tell you, well, man, that theory has a lot of holes in it, or that theory actually sounds right. So debunking has its place where when you're using it to have a debate, but this idea that people take a concept out of context and then take what they want about it and create a few kind of threads, but mostly really it's ad hominem attacks, right? It's like attacks on character, it's mockery, it's a type of attitude more so than what they're even talking about. It's been occurring for a long time on YouTube, but just even Mythbusters and the Apollo missions, right? So the way they even debunk so-called the Apollo mission conspiracy is really obnoxious, in my opinion. Just like if you watch it, you can read people's energy, and they just sound very arrogant and to some degree nefarious. But, you know, they could just do it because that's that kind of attitude, that obnoxious, like, mentality. But, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about the Apollo missions. They are, in whatever regard you come at them, they're just this one-of-a-kind event that should be debatable. It should be talked about. Mary says, does being close to the water give me a better image? I think Florida in general has some of the best dark skies, and yeah, where I'm at near the water is actually depends. Like sometimes, like at moonrise in the east, it doesn't help because there's so much haze. I bet it would be different if I were inland, or maybe in like, I don't know, Utah, or where is it, or like Santa Fe, where you don't see the shore and you don't get that kind of watery haze. Maybe it would be different, but I think Florida in general, and particularly the Gulf area, like has some really nice skies still. Patrick says, what's on the rim of that said crater, dark crater top arrow from another crater? Yeah, so craters and features on the moon form in chains in a way. So if you imagine kind of like a snaking pattern, even at the mouth of Chrysium right here. Let me actually get the paint program out and sketch a little bit. What's happening, Awesome Army? Shout outs to Canada. Too much humidity tonight. I mean, it's humid, but it's also like there's the cold front, but it's also quite warm, and it's also evening, right? And the sun is just set, you know, has just set, and you're still getting residual kind of aberration from that. Either way, like, you can look at it both ways. It could be tragic that we don't have crystal clear, unshaking camera, or we could just say, wow, it's unbelievable that we can see the moon at all. What's happening, Marky Rowe? Part 2, home and chillin'. Hell yeah. Charlie Silverman says, how do they debunk a clear hexagon? I don't think they talk about it, right? Like, I think even if we were to say, like, okay, this wasn't formed by electrical arcing between two planets, right, as that's postulated in electric universe cosmology, is that it's clearly a hexagon. Therefore, it starts to question whether, like, all of these craters and features are impact related, right? So things that impact things, ballistics, if you study ballistics, and when I say study, I just mean from an outsider's perspective, just look up ballistics, spend one night looking into bullet holes, bomb holes, etc., etc., etc. Look at how they look, and then look at the surface of the moon, and then look at NASA JPL's simulation of how the moon was formed. And try and put those three pieces together and tell me it's not weird that, like, the moon, the actual moon that we're seeing here, is just rife with hexagons, pentagons, snaking patterns, things that look carved, right? Things that look sharply carved. Not just gullies and valleys and stuff like that, but also like features in the middle of plains, like Rima Hyginus, like the sword, or this little snaking pattern at the mouth of Mare Crisium. Not only does it follow primitive, like Platonic geometry shapes, but also it appears in places that couldn't occur in like highlands versus lowlands. So that's really how I got to the fact that lunar features and Martian features, right, but mostly lunar because that's what I can see, must have been formed by either boiling, right, like bubbles, and then like Mare Crisium was a giant sphere, and then it hit the outer rims and became hexagonal to some degree, and then it popped like a boil. Or that electric arcing was happening at a massive scale between the moon and another planet like Mars or Earth or something else, or Neptune. Maybe I was reading a lot about like early Tiamat stuff, and they reference the moon as being part of either Uranus or Neptune, maybe, and maybe was recaptured by Earth. But let's say the moon was formed by electrical arcing. It would make so much sense, right? It's one of those obvious jump to conclusions. You're like, okay, you're running a lightning bolt at a giant scale across the surface of a rocky body, and it's leaving these very geometric, magnetic, resounding shapes that we see everywhere. We see them in honeycombs, we see them in molecules, we see them in cell breakage, we see them in basalt flats, we see them in nebula, we see them on the surface of planets, we see them at the bridge of the eye. Hexagon side by side, the butterfly shape or the torus shape is intrinsic, is inherent to all things. Even the word debunking like makes no sense when it comes to considering this thing. Like, there's no point in even thinking about it, because it's like saying, yeah, bees just do that randomly. Yeah, they just build hexagons randomly. They're perfect, but yeah, just rando. That's what debunking amounts to today, to me, given what information we actually have, right? Just my channel alone, which is seen by nobody, by very few people, I'm showing right here, right now, hexagon on the moon, giant hexagon. And nobody from science cares. Nobody from debunking cares. Thunderbolts Project doesn't watch it, right? But this is like way cooler, way more important than anything that they're talking about, to be honest. And not Thunderbolts, but I just mean, like, that's not fair, right? But it would be cool to see, you know, like, the Thunderbolts Project acknowledge some of the smaller channels that push Electric Universe. It would actually unify. But anyway, that's for another rant. Point is, Marky Rose says, now I got an Apollo space banner. Are you kidding? That's funny. Well, at least people should look into Apollo. I think the big conspiracy about Apollo, more so whether they landed or not, is why don't people talk about the Apollo mission? Why don't more people actually talk about the Apollo missions is the big conspiracy. It's like living in Twilight Zone for me, where like people basically performed what amounts to miracles during the Apollo mission and had miraculous amounts of money. You know, one-off event that only 12 people could do, all survived, came back, felt nothing about it, and no one ever talks about it, except to denigrate one another and call each other names. That, to me, is a conspiracy. What's up, Ila Tiki? So glad I'm back. Any opinion on the fission tracks found in moon rocks? Recurrent micronova, massive arcing? I think, yeah, the stratification portion of layering soil and layering earth and moon dust and whatever. Andrew Hall and a couple of others talk about it so clearly on the Thunderbolts Project channel that and if you watch Billy Yelverton's videos that show levitation of dust using like electrostatic dust levitation, so layers of stratification of soil and dust on moon rocks makes perfect sense. I would imagine, like, and not to take anything away from it, but that this idea that only some planets have this type of thing, and only some nebula have some this type of thing, and only these types of planets are Earth-like, and only... I think that's honestly just generally nonsense. I think it's just a way to promulgate tons of questions that are pointless. It's obvious that the whole universe is made of the same substance. In fact, if you take it one step further and you study this, there's this concept that I came across that makes a lot of sense to me, which is the fact that the entire periodic table is all light. And light manifests differently as it moves along a Fibonacci spiral. And we know, or I know, and I presented that Fibonacci spirals emanate from the center of the toroidal hypotrochoid shape. At the very center, just like you're looking right now at the hexagon Crisium, to the left of it we got Proclus. Actually, I was going to sketch, so let me sketch a little bit. It's so sketch, man. So right here, that is Proclus crater. And then this hexagon, Mare Crisium. Why is it a hexagon? Because it starts circular, edges outwards, it hits density. It hits other layers and this is also circular, it's pushing against it, therefore it creates nested hexagons. That's how hexagons actually are created. Why it happened? Could be boiling, right? It could be, let me just lower this shot just a little bit, right here. No, not right there, right here. So when the Terminator line moves a bit more, you'll see this crater right there, Plato. This is Proclus, rather. And Proclus is kind of right at the center of two hexagons right there. You've got the influx right here, the coaxial Birkeland filament. You've got the expanding Fibonacci spiral. Why? Because compression, rarefaction. Compression at the center of this shape, and then rarefaction as it expands, and then compression again, and rarefaction again. And then this is the dielectric, whoops, that's not what I was trying to do. The inertial plane, and that's why you get these, that's why you get eyeballs and eye sockets. That's why you get planets in orbit. Because matter coalesces along the dielectric inertial plane that exists when almost every pinch, I guess, if you want to call it a pinch, but I'll show you exactly how this looks. Hold on, let me just check the chat room. See, in Cosmic Confusion, I seen a really cool overlay of NASA's backside of the moon pic and the pic of Ceres front. It's a perfect match. I think there's some BS going on. So I don't know, like, that's a whole other thing, but just remind me to talk about it because I'd love to see Ceres. And I see that it is in the sky, but it's very hard to track. Can't see it up close, obviously. And then there are these shots of the backside or the far side of the moon, and they're very intriguing to me. It's one of those things that I feel like, can you really fake that? You know, because a lot of different countries have taken shots of it, and it would make sense that, you know, my take on the Apollo missions, just so everybody knows, is that I think there is something going on. Like, I don't know if you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you're so crazy to think that they didn't do it, they must have done it. Okay, maybe they did it, right? But what I used to think, no way, no how, it was impossible. However, if you go through the NASA Flickr account, the Apollo missions, there are about 8,000 photos from the Apollo missions, and a lot of them look like they are really real, right? Like, not the ones with the people in them, but like the ones from like the far side of the moon, the ones looking back at Earth, the ones looking at the moon from different angles. All of those look like shots that are just remarkable and almost impossible to fake. So I moved away from calling the Apollo missions fake a few years ago, because it's very hard to say that for sure. What I can say is that if I were to be pressed about it, and I'm just pressing myself, which is that robots can probably get to the moon, and maybe Mars, and that robots can get all those types of photos. And then you could also put people in a studio and combine the two. Happens all the time in this type of world. But again, they could have also sent men to the moon and actually walked around, and it totally could be possible. But then I would have so many more questions. Again, one of them would be, why is it not a national holiday? Why don't any of the people who came back from the moon write or talk about the moon in a way that makes them sound like they know something about the moon versus that they're just celebrities and or you know, military men? I've read and watched so many videos and books about the astronauts, and they just do not sound like people who have had the experience that they claim to have. But that is something that's very subjective, right? A lot of people say, what do you mean those guys are buttoned up? They're real pros. They're never going to spill the beans, never going to say anything. And that's probably true. probably true. So if the moon was boiled, by what cause? Flash boil from impact. So I don't know if flash boil from impact could be possible. So what I was saying earlier about impacts, right? So this idea that the moon can be showered in a stream of, in a giant like bombardment era, means that so many other things would have to take place in order for the features that we see to occur. Now, could, the basic craters and the basic mare, that is maybe possible. But then features like Aristarchus and Kepler and Copernicus that are diamonds, that are features that look carved, start to bridge the gap between hexagons and, carved features versus impact features. So the other thing is about impact related phenomenon is that you don't see, if you looked up right now, you're like, okay, ballistics and impacts. No laboratory footage or military footage that shows impact craters looks anything like moon craters. Even though there are videos straight up that say they do. They'll do an impact crater, they'll drop something into the sand, they'll say, see, it's just like moon craters, but all you have to do is pull up this video and look at it, and you'll see how different the moon surface looks versus how laboratory craters, so-called craters, actually look. But then, if you look at Billy Elverton or Electric Universe Eyes or Electro Terra Vision or any of the guys who have done, and women who have done electric arc discharge in a laboratory, as well as all our historians, our historical figures in the Thunderbolts Project, I think, I'm trying to think, was it Juergens? And I think others just, hypothesized this, but also did laboratory experiments. I'm forgetting the guy's name. But anyway, if you see the lab experiments, you'll see that electric arcs at giant levels of voltage interacting with clay and soil and dust and all sorts of different... you need water, right? Like, you need some sort of water, some sort of liquid in the soil. But once that creates a lock with this giant electrical current that moves across the surface, these features occur naturally, like in chains and side by side. And so I think that's where I lean towards. It's almost, I want to say there's always room for doubt, right? However, it's 99%, in my opinion, that almost all features on all bodies were created by interactions between the bodies electrically versus things have been scattered and bombarded with all sorts of these different random showers of rocks and then ended up with these very perfectly shaped geometric structures. That's a lot to say a little, but yeah. I think the organization just shows. That's why we get all the pareidolia on the moon. We don't get slipshod randomness. We get perfect spirals. We get nested hexagons. We see faces. And faces occur because faces and humans and bodies are built around these same geometric shapes. So we're pinched plasma peas in a pod. Okay, NGC says, please don't tell me the Easter Bunny isn't real. Well, it's as real as you want to make it, right? Michael Smith says, how long have I been doing this? So I streamed for the first time September 2015, and I bought the scope, I think, in May. Yeah, so about 5 years. And before that, I had a camera and a pair of binoculars for about a year, maybe. But studying this stuff, like about early days of the internet, I was researching JFK stuff, like 1999, 2000, when there were like no conspiracies online, nobody thought about anything. And I used to type in conspiracies, and you get like 2 websites about who killed JFK, and then the Oliver Stone movie, and that was all there was. There was nothing else. People say there are conspiracies forever. I'm like, yeah, not really though. It all kind of, like, what happened, like, I think 2003, 2004, that like that truther stuff started to come in, and that's when it really spilled out. Or maybe not that there weren't conspiracies, I just mean like they weren't online the way they were now. I like peas, yeah. So Ilatiki says, Ben Davidson seems convinced that it's from recurrent micronovas. So the whole kind of thing with suspicious observers, I used to watch Ben back in 2011, 2012. There's always eyes open, no fear, 4 a.m. But so Ben has done a lot of good work, I gotta say. A lot of people shit talk, but he's done a lot of great work. And then when I discovered Thunderbolts Project, I realized that it was basically because I had watched him for a lot of years that I started getting recommended Thunderbolts videos. He also hung out with, actually let me change the shot up here and get wide shot. Since I'm talking. Yeah, and Ben Davidson went and hung out with Billy Yelverton, did an astronomy tour on his bus. So with all the stuff that people say, he still was a pioneer in this realm, and he's, I think, perfectly right about a lot of things. That being said, this idea of micronovas and catastrophism is a perspective. It's obvious that these things do happen, and micronova is just a very glamorous and seductive way of saying that the sun has solar flares, right? And that and if we're connected to the sun, then solar flares affect human beings and consciousness, right? That's all that's implied by saying the word micronova. And it also means that micronovas or certain types of events cause earthquakes as well. And the whole suspicious observers thing has ultimately turned into like an earthquake awareness thing and a prediction app. And at the very core of it, how can you really hate on that, right? Like, as much as anybody gives him shit, again, I'll stand up for the work that he's done, the same way I will for Ken Wheeler, the Aurea Apophysis. People are like, oh, Ken says this and Ken says that, but I'm like, yeah, but Ken also showed us the ferrocell. And Ken also explained light, and like very perfectly. And Ken talked about Eric Dollard, and Ken was part of Electric Universe before it was cool. And like Ken's a pretty brilliant person, right? But people find him off-putting to some degree. So, but about the micronova bit is that if recurring micronovas happen, then they happen, right? So I think the idea of belaboring catastrophism talk is another distraction for never learning something new. And that's sort of where I come from. And that's not to imply that Ben hasn't done a lot of new stuff. So I don't know him. But I will say that there is a feeling on certain channels, ufology channels, suspicious observers channels, and it's not as much with Thunderbolts, right? Thunderbolts has a different type of thing. You're like, man, you're so far removed from the people who watch you, but your information is so freaking right. And all the comments reflect that, but or most of the comments do. And but yeah, so Suspicious Observer's vibe is a lot like, hell yeah, we're in this group together, we're all ready, we're all prepared, and we're all gonna die. Isn't it great? It's actually, no, sorry, it's not, and doesn't it all suck? And I'm saying, like, yeah, that's all gonna happen, but like, is that all you want to talk about? Right? Is that what we're talking about every day? Like, the whole point of life is to live, not to continue to wait to die. Although that's just also, again, perspective, right? Some people want to live like that. And what's up, New Perspective? It says, Ken is arrogant but brilliant. Like, I don't mind when people call me arrogant or elite, and I don't think it bothers Ken, actually. I think what I personally like, why I choose my Ken Wheeler videos with care, is because he is a little bit in his own head about how dark things are and about how bad things are. I'll give you an example. Like, he did a whole thing about how, things at stores are running out. Or at the beginning of Corona, when everybody jumped on the fact that, like, it's all terrible, it's super terrible, it's the worst thing ever, and this thing shows that you're gonna have military troops in the streets and and take people away. And I'm like, yeah, definitely gonna happen. But like, you're gonna live in that kind of paranoia constantly. So that's where I come from on it. Like, yeah, it's all going to definitely happen. It's all going to be bad. Why do we know that? Because the guarantee is that we die, right? Like, you're definitely going to die. Like 100%. So the whole real Zen mentality, right, is to live while you got the chance. This idea of living, but also lamenting living, like, is not living, in my opinion. Right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people might disagree and say, like, oh, you're just taking it too lightly and you don't care. And I know a lot of people, like, I've had people in my chat who are, like, who are fans who just say, oh, you don't take it seriously enough. And I'm like, yeah, it's super serious until, like, you realize that that's all you're thinking about. And you're just waiting for the next crisis. And for me, I mean, like, it's paralyzing, right? And ultimately what really happens is people live long and boring lives. That's the true misery. Am I wrong? I mean, that's the true misery, when people just wait for catastrophes and they don't happen. And then they've done nothing with their lives. Sorry, like, that's not going to be me. As case in point, me chatting with all of y'all tonight watching our moon. Sorry, I see I might have blown out your speaker. I apologize for that. Jesslyn Velasquez says, space definitely is scary to go into, but very fascinating to think about. Well, I'll say to that yes, to some degree, but also, how are we separated from space at all? We're in space. We're of space. In fact, the fact that we even exist at all is due to the fact that space keeps an image of us constantly, like a giant parent of some sort. Astrolabium says energy taxing. I know, right? I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do, but for me, man, there's so much to discover, like about optics and about consciousness and history and the surface of the moon. And not even discover, maybe just watch the moon, but you know, to if I were to sit here and tell y'all every night, oh, look at that UFO, look at that alien, oh my God, Star Brother, oh my God, they're coming to save us, disclosure, blah, 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 blah. Watch the banners under the video. Watch them all, like, lose their freaking mind right now. What are they talking about? What are they talking about? Or if I were to say, guys, like, moon's going to come crashing to Earth. It's going to explode. It's coming to crash to Earth. And, like, we're all going to die, guys. But buy some T-shirts, you know, but support me with a like. I mean, it's horrible, right? I don't watch those videos because, look, it's good people who have a standard set by bad people. And because they want to become rich and or popular and or just even participate, you end up emulating what's really ultimately not fun. Jesslyn says, I think I subscribed to you like 2 years ago when you went live for a lunar eclipse in 2018. Hell yeah. I do remember you, actually. I kind of, like, because I look at the chat so often, I kind of do remember if somebody came through, but I wasn't sure. Thank you for validating me. So, yeah, I've captured a lot of amazing clips on TakeBackSpace, and yeah, some of those events were the influxes of a new subscriber group. Just rolling up a little bit to see if I missed any comments. Shania Wills, what's going on? I remember my mom pointing out that the moon pics are fake, that the flag was blowing and couldn't because space doesn't have wind. So something like that, like when I was talking earlier about, like, I used to say that the moon landings were fake, and I was for sure they were fake. But again, I think the real way of just dispelling that myth is to go to Flickr, type in NASA Apollo missions, spend one night. It's about 8,000 to 10,000 photos that you just can, like, go right and left through. And it'll either make you completely believe that they're real, or it'll make you wonder whether, you know, it was robots mixed with Earth, you know, studio people, or whether it was all fake. But when you see those photos, it's very, very difficult to say it was all fake, for me, you know, just because there are certain pictures that you just cannot get You just cannot get unless you leave Earth. But the flag in the wind, you know, I don't know about that, right? I've seen the videos, I've seen the analysis. Very hard to gauge because apparently the flags were aluminum and they were made out of metal, like a very thin, like sheet metal, and they could have just been bending or swaying with convection, like just very slight wind convection. We don't know what the surface of the moon is exactly like. There are these really broad statements, right? Engines don't work in space. Sound doesn't work in space, etc. Those things. But a lot of those are not true ubiquitously, right? Some of them are true to some degree in certain spots. Some are not true at all. So it's a lot like when people say, oh, the moon has no atmosphere. And then I'm like, that's wrong. And they're like, well, it has a little atmosphere, but just a little bit. And I'm like, that's also stupid, right? Like, because why do you have to phrase it as if it just has? If you were not copying popular science, you would say the moon has a thin atmosphere, or a remnant magnetic field. But it's just a little bit. It's only just a tiny bit. Don't even look there. Don't look at that. The moon doesn't really have an atmosphere. Not really. Just only a tiny bit. That's how when people talk to me like that, I'm like, that's like, what is your problem? Like, what are you trying to? What is your implication? Don't look into it. What is your implication that it's unimportant that the moon has a magnetic field and a surface atmosphere? Like, makes no sense to me to justify it as, oh, it's just that. Oh, it's just the Big Bang. It's just the speed of light. Like, yeah, that's really impressive. Like, also, there's no speed of light, but let's not get into that just yet. Satellite microphones pick up wind sounds sometimes. And also, hi, Silent Murmur, what's going on? Yeah, I mean, if you point a certain type of device at the moon right now, and interpret the oscillations as sound, the moon is talking to us right now. Why is it talking to us? I think the very simple way of looking at consciousness, totally stealing from Alan Watts, but Alan Watts said something that blew my absolute mind apart. It says, when you tap an object, what do you think that sound is but consciousness? Right? Even the table that we think is unconscious, that is interacting with my human existence as in the form of sound. So everything at every level is a version of consciousness. Therefore, of course, planets would have sounds, and there would be a certain type of sound interface in space. Because we are in space. Like, this idea that somehow, like, there's no sound in space, but there's sound on Earth. Well, no, we're inside space and of space. So sound exists in space. It just so happens to exist at a volume and at a certain frequency that humans, who are also at a certain frequency and volume, happen to resonate with in this particular consciousness on this particular planet. Right? But this idea that no engines work, no fuel works, no sound works. Okay. All right. Let's not look into it anymore. So Dr. Ed Hassan is pushing me to talk about the light stuff. Yeah, so this is copying from Ken Wheeler, right? So Ken talks about how light doesn't travel. Eric Dollard talks about it too. I bet you Tesla was sort of talking about it. Tesla's reading people who talked about it, that light is rarefaction and compression. It manifests as a vibration in the ether. To be more particular, a sound vibration in the ether creates what we see as visible light. It doesn't travel, and it has no speed or speed limit. So, and I know that's not even doing it justice. Like, if you really want to hear it in detail, go to Ken Wheeler or, Theoria Apophysis, and you'll find Ken talking about light and magnetism. But if you take it one step further, you'll realize that there's this idea that from our perspective, we can place rules on a system that we don't understand, or that the people who are placing the rules don't understand, right? So I'll give you a few examples. One, there's variable speed of light that not only Einstein wrote and talked about and experimented with, but many scientists, if you spend the time looking it up, you'll see that tons of people end up with fractional differences with the speed of light and larger differences over courses of time. Therefore, speed of light even being slightly variable means so many calculations are different. One. And then two, you have this idea of redshift and Doppler effect. And okay, I'll give you an example. Somebody's asking me about Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about the double slit experiment, right? And how confusing and mysterious it is. It's so mysterious that light does this thing that we can't interpret ever. And you realize that this is just like one experiment, first of all. Two, it says nothing, absolutely nothing about like what you can do with light, right? And it just is. But think about how much time is spent on this double slit experiment that says nothing about science or activity versus talking about real world science, which is looking at the moon, looking at the sun, looking at Orion, realizing that it would be impossible if the light were delayed because we're interacting with it right now. Even if it was delayed, right? Even if light from Orion took 1 trillion years to get to us, we're still interacting with the light right now. So the narrative, this seductive, nefarious, kind of obnoxiously arrogant, and I have nothing against arrogance, but when you're obnoxiously arrogant and you're wrong, clearly wrong about it, to say that, oh yes, light has a speed limit. It's a limit. Who made it? Oh, humans decided there's this speed limit on what is pure consciousness. Yes, definitely. We're 100% right about that. No. And then two, Halton Arp and other astronomers who have looked into this idea of Doppler shift, redshift, realize that like redshift can be interpreted as youth and age, or interpreted as age variable versus a distance variable. Just because it's old don't mean it's far. And somehow we live in a world where those two things are tied together. And you'll see Ken Wheeler talk about this a lot, about like how big G, how gravity dominates, and without gravity you got nothing. And not to say that gravity doesn't exist, right? Like that's why conspiracies, certain types of conspiracies just say, oh, it doesn't exist. Well, push something off a cliff and see if it falls, right? That is described as gravity. Now, what gravity actually is a different thing, right? That can be talked about in a way that's not like fear-inducing and, you know, where people just lose their mind and they just start calling you names. But yeah, anyway, explaining light, even talking about speed of light or using light in a way that's like, oh, it's just a ruler. In fact, as I say that, you realize, right, what a ruler is. Something that rules over. But just saying light is this kind of thing that somehow humans have this complete grasp over in terms of science is just like removing an entire portion of what light actually is, which is life, which is the fact that every human being, regardless of math, has access to the sun and the moon and reflections and rainbows. So light is an equalizer for all. So this idea that science somehow has a grasp on its rules is highly incorrect, in my opinion. I mean, they might have a way of describing it that looks like a rule book, but in fact makes much more sense that it is not defined that way. And I'll tell you why, because again, we're looking at the moon, and the moon is supposed to send us light that's delayed, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is we're directly experiencing the moon moment to moment. The plasma layer of us experiencing it moves away from us at a certain rate, and therefore the echo of our perception could be perceived as a latency or a delay. However, our experiential symbiosis with the moon is immediate and intrinsic and directly connected. And therefore, if it's like that with the moon, then it's like that with the sun, and it's like that with Orion. And there's no such thing as old light. There is light, and then there's memory of it. All right. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Lots of cool comments. Field perturbation, right? New perspective. What's up, Cybercell? He says, if we truly went there, wouldn't we know what is there? So moon landing, right? Like, I moved away from asking those kind of, like the flag question or the rocket. There are all these questions within the conspiratorial mindset of questioning the Apollo missions, right? I think the biggest mystery to me, and I've said it many times, is that we don't talk about it. Is that there is an impossible dialogue about the Apollo missions. There's a massive rift between people of all ages and all sizes who are like, well, I'm not really sure. Did that really even happen? That thing is crazy. And you have a whole bunch of people who are like, it definitely didn't happen. And you have a whole lot of people who are like, of course it happened. What do you mean? You're crazy. But all of that aside, the really weirdest thing is that there's no national holiday for landing on the goddamn moon. Not a national holiday. It's crazy. There's a National Pancake Day, and there's not a, like, we goddamn landed on the moon. People walked around, got back on a craft, came back to Earth, and we did it several times. Nobody died, except Gus and his crew on the first, but they were on Earth. And yeah, it's 2020. No other country can replicate it. America can't replicate it. Can't even get a rover there reliably. But somehow there are also 50 rovers or 50 missions that have been to Mars, which is 56 million miles away. Moon is 250,000 miles away. So if you put all those factors into play, the kind of real conspiracy that emerges around Apollo is this lack of information, lack of clarity, and lack of the ability to discuss Apollo from a perspective of, like, what's really happening here? Like, what like, how did you do it? Like, it's akin to a miracle to me, what happened. Not just, and I say miracle in the sense that, like, I think a lot of things are crazy, amazing, right? Like having a moon, you could say, is a miracle. But I just mean, like, in the realm of things, people get lauded for all sorts of things, like writing a screenplay, getting a Grammy Award, right? Going to the moon and getting back alive is the biggest achievement ever, by any means, by any measure. And it's talked about as if, like, oh, yeah, but, yeah, we went there, cut and dry, done. What do you mean? Done the moon. I'm like, what? There's something almost maddening about it, but also so crazy about it. It's like crazy eyes. Straight up. What is going on with that? Like, why can't we have a national debate? Why isn't there a show every night that's like, mankind, like, freaking walked on the moon? Like, these are the heroes, and, like, they know the names of the craters, and it's just crazy that we live in both the world where that's supposed to have been 100% real, and yet, like, we also live in a world where, like, what's trending right now on Twitter has nothing to do with the moon or space. Like, nothing. Not one thing. And that's just insane to me. Insane. Charlie Silverman says some say Kubrick filmed it. Seeing all of those, very possible that the stuff that we saw on TV was filmed after 2001: A Space Odyssey. Really have no way of saying 100% sure, so I always kind of leave it up to everybody's opinion. My opinion is that it's possible. I don't know. It's too convenient of a story, but... And Lost Brooklyn says, they're like, nothing to see here. It's totally Officer Barbrady. Move along, everybody. Nothing to see here. And I keep telling people, I'm like, guys, they're like, miracle, like straight up magic. Like, not gold medals at the Olympics, not speed barriers in a car, not a Tesla, not Bitcoin. landing on the effing moon and getting back, thousandfold achievement of all achievements. Even Jesus. It's even more impressive than Jesus, theoretically. Theoretically, human bodies, like weak... Sorry, they're not weak at all. Human bodies are very strong. But just in space, you don't really stand a chance. So human bodies going into space for 6 days in a tin can, land on what we're looking at. Of course, all the guys on board know zero names of craters. And somehow me, like an amateur astronomer, knows like 50 names of craters on the moon at the top of my head for no reason. Nobody cares. I know all the names of all these things. Guys who went there, no idea. I have no... If you ask them if there are stars, no idea. Where did you land? No clue. But they landed there. Then they played golf and they drove around. And then and they called Richard Nixon on an old phone. Can't use phones now. At peak of all technology, I can't keep one cell phone going with my brother upstate. Let alone, no, they called from the moon. Sorry, I'm just imagining this. And then they got back. They still didn't know any names or craters. And somehow, like, the interview is the most awkward thing ever put to film. And there's a National Pancake Day. and no, we landed on the moon day. I mean, for real, no landed on the moon day, but National Pancake Day. I mean, you tell me, like, where the conspiracy is. Like, forget the flag and the landing, the engines and flat Earth. I'm talking about, like, you can't even have a logical discussion about, like, what happened during the Apollo years. And they'll tell you, oh, there was no will. No, so, like, the comments are, I could recite them off the top of my head. It's like, but you don't understand. There was the Cold War, and it was Russia, and, like, we need to flex. And I'm like, yeah, but we were giving the Russians wheat and money and info, and, like, hell no. And it was Nazi scientists, so definitely not adjust, like a Cold War stance. Okay, take that aside. But you don't understand. NASA was really funded because, Lyndon Johnson and Nixon really loved NASA, right? You are like, they talk to me like you can't look this shit up, but you can look up who was president. And Richard Nixon funded NASA more than, say, like Obama or like Bush or any of these people recently. Hell no. Hell no. Plus, you find efficiencies, right? Like, if you did it for $30 billion, even with adjusted inflation, $120 billion is a drop in a bucket for any of these cats nowadays. We have, like, people who are so rich that, like, the people are so rich nowadays that we can't get to the moon is so suspect. Or it's completely easy, in which case, like, the general public has no idea. And moon missions are very easy. Totally possible. Totally possible. What's up, effed up world? Apollo is the angel of the bottomless pit. Apoyo. Wait, what happened? Wow. I wonder what the banner under the video says now. It's like, beware, information overload. Actual incoming questions. Stuff we can't cover this up. No. They don't care. Nobody cares because nobody really knows how to ask the questions or who to ask the questions to, right? Who am I to even ask these questions? Cold War total theater. Also another way of, like, seductive language. Spooky language, to quote George Carlin. It's like, spooky language, trick all the people into thinking it's real. It doesn't mean that the effect of the phrase Cold War didn't induce panic. It did, right? Like, that's not what I imply when I say, like, Cold War, ha ha ha. I mean, like, the Cold War in essence of, like, why it occurred is what I question. Because, like, there's no logical rationale behind it. Right? When America has been the superpower forever, and they work with all the global superpowers to maintain control over all the rest of the populations, there's no reason to be at war with Russia. It's just a show. And then when you listen to Alan Watts in 2020 He says it. Alan Watson, 58, was saying, oh yeah, you think that Russia and America are at war, but they're not. It's all a show. And you're like, Alan Watts, thanks for validating it. Because, like, you're like, wait, what? Hell yeah, no banner today. Oh yeah, I was still ranting about, like, times were different during Apollo, right? So they funded NASA, and NASA had a lot of money and a lot of smart people who, well, possibly, who were at the front of this, and that's why we got to the moon. And then we canceled the missions because there was a whole kind of shift between the Cold War to Vietnam, and then funding got pulled, and then the lack of will. I've heard this story, this rigmarole, but really it goes nowhere. It's a little bit like the catastrophism stuff, right? It'll roundabout you back to a place where you have no rational answer as to what's going on. You can say anything you want nowadays. You can say, oh, there's no will, you know. I wish they would fund NASA. I wish we... And even worse, right? The stuff that actually irritates me is, like, people are like, I wish we would fund NASA. I'm like, really? You're funding NASA directly? You decide where, like, half the spending goes? Or, like, do a small group of people? So we ultimately pay with our tax dollars, or maybe. But really, who funds NASA and decides how much NASA gets is a small group of people. It has nothing to do with a YouTube commenter or any of us or any of you. Like, sorry, I'm not as old as some of you oldies, but even you oldies, like, it's not your choice how much NASA money gets. And then will? There is will, right? During the Bush years, they wanted to go. Then Obama was like, no, it's already done. And then Trump wants to go, but then watch, Biden's going to overturn it. Watching 20 years of them saying, yeah, we're going to go. This time it's real, guys. This time we're going. I swear we're going. Oh, we can't go. Sorry. Yeah, we lost all the technology, have no money, no will. Like, straight up. I mean, I'm ready to see it, right? I'm not this conspiracy person that's like, I hope they're lying. No, I hope they're not lying. I hope they can go. Like, this is the big joke about conspiracy people, is that all you people who think fringe hate everybody and all things. I think a lot of fringe people are like, man, I'm really bummed out that this is, like, treated this way. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I hear that more so, not even just in conspiracy, like, circles, but even, like Fraser Cain of Universe Today, right? Veritasium. PBS, that guy who does the PBS Nova videos. They look scared to me. They don't look intelligent. I'm sorry. I mean, no, not to be insulting, but when they talk about space, they sound like they have no concept of what's going on to me. And not to insult them, right? Like, it's just, I try sometimes. I'm like, let me see what Fraser Cain has to say. Let me see what that guy on Nova has to say. Let me see what Neil deGrasse is talking about now. Let me see what Brian Greene is saying at the symposium for, like, string theory, because, like, they've been at it. I listen to that stuff for, like, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'm like, you guys sound terrified and confused. And maybe I sound very arrogant to say that Electric Universe is the be-all that answers this, but it absolutely gets you thinking the right way. Excuse me. Let's see. Lost Brooklyn, you have a question. It says, this was the first thing that I questioned years ago. Give me your POV on this famous Earth rising from moon. How is the Earth the same size of the moon, how we see it here on Earth? So where I ended up on the Earthrise shot is that perspective really is different, right? So if I were to film, and you've probably seen it on my channel a bunch, but, like, if you've ever used a 300 or 500 millimeter lens, and you've ever seen, like, the moon looking huge over the mountains, or the moon looking like the size of a person, now they're doing these setup shots where people mountain climb and then there's the moon in the background. Depending on the glass, really, that you're using, or the telescopic lens, objects like the moon, let's say, or the sun, can appear really at various sizes, right? It depends on what you choose to make it. So that shot of, like, saying that the Earth rise, the size of Earth in this photo or in this video, it's very hard to use that as a yardstick of any type of measurement, right? Unless you actually, like, and I've actually done calculations on it. I did 3D models of it, kind of, like, punched in the values of the size of the moon. I used Kerbal Space Program. that shot of Earthrise and or anything on Earth, depending on the lens you shoot it with, will look different. And so it's very hard to use that as a metric. That's my take. Jesselyn Velasquez says, I watched that like one time and it sounded boring. Well, PBS doesn't make it interesting. I mean, they really try, though, like with a lot of these tactics that they use on YouTube now, the very fast edits, right? A lot of hand gestures. It's a lot of magic work, right? It's a lot of deception going on that even the people who... I don't think Fraser Cain knows that he's deceiving people on purpose, right? I think Fraser Cain is trying to run Universe Today, and I'm targeting him... Not targeting, I'm just saying, like... That's a terrible way of saying it. I'm just talking about Fraser Cain because he seems like a cool guy, right? And I hear him talk about stuff, but he seems very frustrated with how space is going in the popular sphere, but also spends no time talking about electric universe or other theories, but also seems bound by the fact that popular science is stuck in this way, where he somehow has to adhere to however long it takes a space agency to talk about something. I hope that makes sense. But same thing with the PBS, right? They get a snippet of information from some government source, and then they write all the same news article about it. Like this recent thing about like the Israeli thing with the UFOs, or water on the moon a few months ago, or any number of things, right? It's always a news snippet that they comment on. Who else? You got this guy Tony from Deep Sky, right? Something like that. And he has access to scientists, astronauts, NASA people on his show, right? But what they talk about are like, there's no will, there's no budget, it would be nice if blah, 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 but no budget, but no will. Like most of his shows end up there. I mean, I know I'm not giving him his credit. Like he spends a lot of time on this stuff. But he also sounds like Fraser, where they're just like, I'm so sick of this. Like, I wish we could go to the moon. Like, again, to re-emphasize this idea of like, just because I talk about conspiracies doesn't mean I want them to be conspiracies, right? I would love it if there were a public moon program. I would absolutely love it. All I want to do is look at the moon and see like ships going to the moon and have a space tourism program. So in no way am I like, NASA bad, all bad, space fake. Not at all. Like, I love space, but it's really weird how it's presented. Silent Murmur says, it's sad that they seem terrified, and I wonder why they don't choose a more interested narrator. I think it's just because you hire people who try and follow a form, right? Like the talking heads of the media, and people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene, and all these guys have set up a way of talking, right? A certain type of rhetoric. Like Rumsfeld did it, and presidents do it. They get coached, they start talking a certain way, you see them a bunch of times, people copy them. That's why you have the fast editing on YouTube and the obnoxious thumbnails in the videos. And for me, like, there's no point in clickbait, right? Like, I understand that it's always been around, whatever. But point is, clickbait is like some guy on a thumbnail pointing at a cutout picture of a planet, like, is so dumb to me. I don't know, it's so dumb. Maybe I'm being too judgy. However, anyway, clickbait, all these unnecessary wastes of time when... Like Fraser Cain should spend more time on a telescope, right? I know he has one. I know he probably does. But like, just read a little bit of like astronomy.com or phys.org or Universe Today or Deep Sky Network or even Ken Wheeler, right? There's always a sense of dread. Everything sucks. Everything is just terrible. It's just awful. It's just like, it's all ending, right? Or it's a fake sense of wonder, right? And this is not, I didn't mean to lump Ken with these guys. He's way beyond that. I just mean like there's a sense of cynicism that I'm just like, wait, but you're talking about the most amazing thing imaginable. Like these straight up like unbelievable events. How can we be like upset or angry or repulsed by them? I'm more excited. Even the Apollo stuff, I'm more excited to know like what the hell is going on with that. Like, how did these guys go to the moon but they have no idea what craters' names are? Like, they know one. Literally, I'm not lying. If you read like all the astronaut books, maybe like 2 of them sort of reference a crater or a feature on the moon by name. Like Michael Collins talks about it in his book, like he references certain features, I can't remember exactly which, and Neil Armstrong says Clavius maybe twice, and I think Buzz says Tycho crater once. I'm talking about once. I'm talking about like guys went to the damn moon and came back, and they don't know any craters or like features on the moon. It's insane. I mean, that's insane to me. TJ, what's going on? Waiting for a flyby. I know I've been all over the place, but I've been filling in all those holes. Silent Murmur says, I wonder if that was what they believed was a selling approach in the 40s and 50s. Wait. They seem vague and disinterested, hype and less interesting aspects. They're probably doing their best to convey interest, but I agree it's weird the way they describe things. It's a stale note. Yeah, actually what's funny is that talking about Alan Watts validating my concepts, or the way I feel about things, is that Alan Watts is like, they're trying to bore you to death, right? The biggest conspiracies are hidden with boredom. They're trying to make it as bland and as distant and separated as possible, and it's intentional. Because I can pull up the way that like just like I was saying with the will and the funding for NASA. Like, that's not even the question, right? The question is like, what's going on with like the miracle of the fact that you went there? Who cares about will or money or like, you know what I mean? Like, it's always a diversionary question that really ends up derailing the conversation. Silent Murmur says, the fake wonder, too, seems patronizing since it lacks sincerity. Yeah, it does feel patronizing. It's partly why a lot of people don't watch that stuff anymore. Once you follow Thunderbolts Project for a little bit and listen to somebody like Stephen Crothers or Dr. Pierre-Marie Robitaille or Eileen McCusick or Rupert Sheldrake, you hear like very wise people treat you like a normal human. And then you listen to Joe Rogan and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene, and they talk to you like you're a total asshole. No lie, listen to them talk. They talk at you and down to you. And Wal Thornhill talks to you as if like he's in awe of this universe that we both share. It's that simple. I mean, and you read it in the comments of Thunderbolts Project's videos constantly. What's the most reoccurring theme? Cannot watch popular mainstream videos anymore because of how patronized I feel. Right? It does seem like they're trying to bore people, right? Like, it's so boring. Think about, like, I'll give you another example, like slow-mo guys, the guys who have like a $250,000 slow motion camera, film the most boring things imaginable. Not cool things, boring things. Veritasium, millions and millions of views. Let's fill a fish tank. Let's fill a swimming pool with balls. Why did we do that? Oh, like to show this principle. I'm like, that's what you're doing with millions of followers and money and support? Or Mythbusters or any of those cats, right? When you see like what Billy Elverton did with like no money, and you see what like there are a whole bunch of really brilliant actual scientists on YouTube. And you're like, really? Really, Joe Rogan? Like, that's what you're doing with your time and money? You're like, you're derailing a conversation? Like, I'm talking about, like, people think Joe Rogan is cool. If Joe Rogan were really cool, he'd have a whole Thunderbolts month, right? He'd bring all the cats, Michael Claridge, Wal Thornhill. Can you imagine Joe Rogan talking to, like, Steve Smith or Pierre-Marie Robitaille? Right? Like, why is it fringe to talk about, like, what is clearly stuff that NASA knows about? Magnetic ropes. If you type in magnetic ropes right now, it'll show you all these Birkeland filaments that power planets from the outside. Yet that's not popular science. Popular science is, no, space devoid of electricity. No, magnetism doesn't mean anything in space. No, big G. No, speed of light. We still live in that primitive, idiotic mindset. Makes no sense to me. Hoo-wee, that was a rant. That was a culmination of rants of rants. Rants from France. Cyber Sully says, I one don't one doesn't question everything. If one doesn't question everything, one does themselves a disservice and sets themselves up for being programmed and controlled. Okay, now that's an interesting way of putting it, because I also believe in things like programming and control in a good way, right? So people think immediately nefarious, being programmed and controlled, but we program control computers, we program control music, we program control partners and relationships, and you program control your calendar and your work schedule. So it can be viewed both ways, right? However, and furthermore, when you engage in social media, when you engage even in even watching this, right? Even listening to me, you're choosing to listen to my talking, and you could be influenced by it, right? That's what the warnings under the video are for. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, I don't know if it's necessarily nefarious to be programmed and controlled, because it could always, like, what if you had a great leader who was like, I'm going to program people to just be kind? So, like, I don't listen to Rogan because, or any of these cats anymore, because it's like, for example, like Lady Gaga, right? Like, she's a good pianist and a good singer, right? But the music is not great. And like, you could spend time listening to her, and she's going to sell 1 trillion records. But like, I have time to spend listening to like Alcatraz, or or Miles Davis, or Fela Kuti, or anybody, right? But like, nope. Media's going to tell you, no, you got to listen to the new Taylor Swift record. It's the best record ever made. Or, Beyonce just put out a record, best song you've ever heard. And I'm like, yeah, but no, not really. Right? Like, not really, though. So Rogan is like that. Like, yeah, Joe Rogan, like, really tries. He's really famous. Like, talks about psychedelics, has interesting guests on. But, like, what a freaking waste of time, like, with a platform and that kind of money, that he doesn't actually really talk about interesting topics. Optics. Bring the best optics people and talk about how the eyes work for a month. That's interesting. What happened with Apollo? Like, remember Joe Rogan was there, definitely on the other side of it for a while. He was like, yeah, I don't think it was real, guys. But from like overnight switched his vantage point. I know a lot of people got on that bandwagon. I'm not saying that he should be against the moon or like pro-conspiracy, because if he doesn't want to, he can change his mind. I'm just saying, like, talk about it. Like, why did you change your mind? What was it specifically? He's like, no, just changed my mind. Sorry, you guys are fucking idiots. Excuse my language. Anyway, I hate patronizing people, especially patronizing celebrities, because once you have a lot of power like that, you can make very big changes by just being kind. And people who have that kind of power and are not kind are just either ignorant or petty. Scope getting tired and blinking. No, those are the trees coming into play and being like, wrap it up, B, wrap it up. So this has been a good 2-hour show. Thankfully, the connection held up. Thank you, Spectrum. And let me see if there are any... Yeah, Hutchinson. John Hutchinson, was it? Who melted metal using sound. It's so funny that, like, there's just a quantifiable number of conspiracies and conspiracy videos that have been around. It's actually a very small amount, ultimately. Like optics, right? Like, what is focal distance? What is focus? What is perspective? What is viewing? Like, why does the image flip when it hits the iris, right? What happens with the optic nerve? The chain reaction of peptides in the eye when a photon gets excited by the rods and cones, or when the rods and cones get excited by a photon. Like, just the little research that I did on optics is like infinitely deep, and you could come at it from so many different, like, Cartesian reference frames. You come at it from the medical profession. No, they talk about inane stuff, like the stuff, really, the topics are just banal. Jordan Peterson destroyed this lady interviewer, or Joe Rogan talks about taking mushrooms and microdosing. I'm like, bro, this is like Terrence McKenna was talking about this shit 50 years ago and was already like a pro. It's definitely bland and reiterative. It's not new. So I'm not going to spend any time on that, even though I just spent time talking to y'all about it. All right, everybody. That was fun. I'll take us out with some willpowered here. I'll let the moon drift, and I'll try and catch you all again tomorrow. Same time, same place. And if not, then definitely the day after. It looks like it's clouds tomorrow, but who knows. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to have a quick smoke with y'all and just chill here. Very much appreciate all the questions and great comments and attitude in the chat, as always.
Do you know why I've been beaten from the heart? I know, no lie. I've been thinking about you all night. Why? No why. I've been waiting for your white light. No why. I've been thinking that you should be mine. So call me up, and let's get down, down. So call me up, and let's get down, down. Oh, you send me messages across the cosmic network, and you send me pictures from across the astral plane, and you send me cryptic kisses across the matching network. So call me up, and let's get down, down. So call me up, and let's get down, down. Je t'attends, mon amour, assez tu es, ainsi la même que la même semaine, agitant la éternelle, avec on son oublié. Je suis la même que ton avant et chaque jour. Je t'attends, mon amour, avec les mecs sans agrévé. C'est mon magnétique, c'est l'amour magnétique, c'est mon amour magnifique.
All right, everybody, have a great rest of your night. I'm going to let this song play out. 8:41, another great show. I appreciate each and every one of you, even the naysayers. You're all important. I'll catch you really soon, everybody. Captain out.
Thank